These are the notes for the respiratory, circulatory, and lymphatic systems. At the end of this slideshow, we will also discuss virus structure and reproduction. Starting with the respiratory system. The respiratory system is about how we breathe. It is what lets oxygen into our body and sends the carbon dioxide out of our body. Air enters through our nose or our mouth. The science word back here is pharynx. So air moves into the pharynx and then it goes past the epiglottis. The epiglottis covers the opening to the larynx where you eat or drink to prevent food or water going down into your windpipe and vice versa. When breathing covers your esophagus, so air goes into the larynx. Okay, so what that just said is that the air comes in through your nose or mouth, goes past the pharynx, and then the larynx decides if it's food or air. If it's air, it covers up the esophagus and lets the air go into your lungs. If it's food, then it covers up the larynx and lets the food go down into your stomach. You cannot eat and breathe at the same time. Your body has to choose one or the other. Now, sometimes it chooses wrong, and that's why when you're eating, you find yourself choking. It's because the food went down the wrong path. From the larynx, air moves into the trachea. Trachea is down here. The choice is trachea or windpipe. Windpipe is for air, trachea is for food. So from the trachea, that's when it starts heading down into the lungs. Down here in the lungs, we have the bronchi or the bronchioles. Same thing, just one word singular, the other word's plural. But these little lines, these little vein-looking things, those are the bronchi. At the very bottom of the bronchi, we have the alveoli, and that's right down here. And their job is to pass the gases, the air that you just breathed in, or the carbon dioxide that you're trying to breathe out. It gets the gases exchanged and sends them where they need to go. And now we're moving on to the circulatory system. The circulatory system is all about your heart and your blood and your veins and your arteries. Blood is made out of plasma, which is the liquid portion of our blood. Our blood is 90% water. It's also made out of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The red blood cells do the job of carrying the oxygen around. They carry the oxygen all through your body and get it where it needs to go. We have discussed sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is where the red blood cells are shaped in more of a sickle pattern, so like ovals, and they can't carry the oxygen the way they're supposed to. White blood cells work for our immune system. They keep us healthy. They defend against invaders like diseases or viruses. And then the platelets help with clotting. So if you cut yourself, if you have a cut on your hand or your arm, the reason you stop bleeding is because the blood clots and doesn't let any more out. Um, that's the job of the platelets. Now, the roads that our blood uses to get around inside of our body, there's two different kinds. We have arteries and veins, and then much smaller and kind of in the middle of the arteries and veins are the capillaries. The arteries carry blood away from the heart, so they have the blood that's full of oxygen. The veins carry blood that's already dropped its oxygen off where it needs to go back to the heart. blood only flows in one direction. If your blood is going backwards, then that is a problem. It is a problem that's usually fixed with surgery. We only want our blood to go one direction. The capillaries, the ones that are kind of the little bitty small things in between, their job is to exchange the gases, the nutrients, and the hormones. Okay, this is about the order of how everything moves around. So starting with the heart, the right side is the pulmonary loop. It pumps oxygen-poor blood through the pulmonary arteries and lungs for gas exchange. So on the right side of the heart, with this picture, red means oxygen rich, blue means oxygen poor. That is a standard color coding that you'll see for anything in anatomy. Okay, so the oxygen poor blood goes through the pulmonary arteries and lungs for gas exchange. So it comes up here and then it goes back into the heart. The left side is the systemic loop, which pumps oxygen rich blood through the body. At the top of your heart, left, you have left and right atria, which are chambers that are in charge of receiving blood that is returning to the heart. That blood, it's already made its trip around your body, so it is oxygen poor. It's missing oxygen. Below the atria are the ventricles. The ventricles pump blood away from the heart. If the blood is leaving the heart, then it has lots of oxygen. So the atria, the ventricles are in charge of the oxygen-rich blood. Okay, this is the order of how blood flows through the heart. The vena cava collects oxygen-poor blood from the body. Next, the right atrium, it goes to the right atrium, then to the right ventricle. So right atrium to the right ventricle, and then from the right ventricle to the pulmonary arteries. From the pulmonary arteries, pulmonary means lungs. So it goes to the arteries that are connected to your lungs. From the pulmonary arteries, that's when it gets into your lungs. When it's in your lungs, it fills up with oxygen, it collects all the oxygen gas that it needs, and then pulmonary veins to the left atrium. From the left atrium, it goes to the left ventricle, so we're over here now. And if you can see, there's little arrows that are supposed to help you there. And then from the left ventricle, blood enters the aorta. The aorta is not on this picture. Okay. Coronary arteries supply fresh blood to the heart muscles and other arteries. So the aorta is the big guy that sends all the blood out to do what it needs to do. And then the rest of the arteries continue sending the blood through, dropping off the oxygen where it needs to go. This is a video that does not work. But what it's showing is a white blood cell attacking an enemy. I'll link this video somewhere else. Still on the circulatory system. The circulatory system transports oxygen and nutrients to the cells and carries waste, also known as carbon dioxide, away from the cells. The lymphatic system. So we're done with the heart, we're done with the circulatory system, we're moving on to the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system collects and recycles fluids that leak from the capillaries, and it's involved in fighting infections. The infections part is where you're probably most familiar with it. Lymphatic vessels carry leaked fluid back to the two major veins in the neck. The lymph nodes are concentrated in your armpits, your neck, and your groin. and they tend to get really tender and they swell up when you're sick. So when you're fighting bacteria or viruses, they'll swell up pretty big. So if you'll notice when you're sick and you go to the doctor, one of the first things the doctor does is feel your neck. And what he's feeling for, or she is feeling for, is swollen lymph nodes. It's one of the signs that you're sick. Oh, lymph tissue includes the tonsils, the spleen, and the thymus. Now, the tonsils is the one that you probably notice the most, and it is inside your throat. So if you open your mouth really big, you can probably see your tonsils in the back of your throat. And when you're sick, they get swollen. And so part of when you have a sore throat and it's hard to swallow, that's your tonsils. They're swollen and they hurt. Okay. Your immune system. So we're still talking about the lymphatic system. It's part of the immune system. It protects our body from infection. The immune system is a functional system rather than an organ system or an anatomical sense. So the immune system's not made out of a bunch of organs. Instead, it's cells or hormones that are inside of your body, and their job is to fight the infection. Certain organs in the body, like the lymphatic system and the circulatory system, are intimately involved with the immune response. So they have a big part to play. Viruses are one of the things that makes us sick. They are not alive. They do have bits and pieces of what we consider make an organism alive, but they don't have them all. One of the problems is that they can only reproduce if they're inside of a host cell. So they cannot live a normal life unless they're living inside of somebody else's cells. They are also pathogens, and that's just a big word that we use to say that they cause diseases. They make people or animals or plants sick. Examples of viruses that you may have heard of include the chickenpox. And chickenpox also causes shingles. The common cold, smallpox and polio, HIV and AIDS, flu or viral pneumonia, mad cow disease, hepatitis, SARS, so COVID fits into the SARS category, measles, mumps, or mono. Mono is called the kissing disease. It's not actually a kissing disease, but they used to believe that it was spread from people kissing each other. Okay, viruses have a protein coat that surrounds a nucleic acid. Nucleic acid, if you remember, is DNA or RNA. The protein coat is a capsid, so it basically is just a place to hold the DNA or the RNA. The nucleic acid of a virus is either DNA or RNA, it's not both. And what the virus does is it inserts its DNA or RNA into a host cell and takes over the cell. It convinces the cell to start making more and more of its own DNA and its own RNA, and it makes more and more of its viruses. Okay, some viruses have an envelope that surrounds the capsid. In order to find the right cell, the right kind of cell that it can take over successfully, it matches, it looks and it's shaped just like the type of cell that it needs. And that's how it recognizes where it's supposed to go. They fit together like puzzle pieces. Viruses are species specific, meaning because they are so specific about what type of cell they can fit, they are designed like puzzle pieces to go together, the virus and the cell. So they can only infect specific animals or plants or even down to specific cells within the animal. The tobacco mosaic virus can only infect tobacco plants. The polio virus can only infect nerve cells in humans. The polio virus, before we had a vaccine for it, made a lot of people really sick. The virus would leave a lot of people paralyzed or unable to walk after they recovered from it. We had a president, President Roosevelt, that survived the polio virus, but he was paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his life. Now, he didn't want his constituents to know that he was paralyzed. So he hid the fact that he was in a wheelchair for most of his presidency. It was only the people close to him that knew that he was in a wheelchair. This is about how the virus reproduces. It's called the lytic cycle. It is a cycle of viral infection, replication, and cell destruction. The virus attaches to the host. We have our picture here. Here's our virus. It attaches to the host and then it inserts its DNA. The DNA goes into the cell and it convinces the cell to make more DNA for it. So it just takes over its normal DNA replication process and convinces the cell, you need to make more of my DNA. And as it does, it ends up making more and more viruses. So see here, it starts with the DNA, and then over here, it starts producing more and more viruses. Eventually, the cell can't hold all the viruses that it's made, and so the cell explodes. It's torn apart by the virus, and all of the baby viruses go out and find new cells, and they infect the new cells. And they go through the same process. They hijack the DNA system, they make more viruses and explode that cell and move on. Now, when our immune system goes to fight the virus, it has to destroy the cell completely. So, and again, we'll talk about this another time, but the immune system will completely take over the hijacked cell and break it down and kill it so that it can't hurt anybody else or any other cells. Now, the lysogenic cycle, this is another type of cycle. The virus hides within the host DNA cell. Viruses attach to the host cell and inject the nucleic acid. Nucleic acid inserts into the host DNA. The host cell undergoes DNA replication and cell division. Certain conditions spark the provirus to disengage from host DNA and begin replicating. Host cells burst. Okay, so what this is saying, the virus shows up, inserts its DNA into the cell, but instead of immediately making baby viruses, it incorporates its own DNA into the cell, and the cell just treats it like it's its own. And the cell goes through a normal life cycle, making baby cells the way it normally would, and then something triggers the virus. And once the virus is triggered, that's when it decides to make more baby viruses. And then just like the other cycle, the lytic cycle, the cell eventually is filled with so many baby viruses that it explodes and it goes through the process again. I think the most recognizable example of this would be something like HIV. This cell is playing the long game. This cell here is playing the short game. There are no cures for viruses. When you have a bacterial infection, your doctor will often give you something like antibiotics. Antibiotics do not work for viruses. We mostly have to rely on our body's immune system to get rid of viruses. Now, the immune system does have some techniques. It will give you a fever, and that increased temperature will burn out the virus. The lymphatic system will make a bunch of for lack of a better word, snot. And the snot will wash out and help fight the virus. But medicine wise, we don't have a lot of things to cure you of a virus once you've been infected. We do have things like vaccines, which can prevent the infection ahead of time. So we have the hepatitis vaccines, the flu vaccines, chickenpox vaccines, polio, COVID vaccines. All of these things will help prevent the virus from making you sick. But once you're already infected by the virus, there's not much we can do. We just have to rely on your body to fight it off. That is the end of this slideshow. If you have any questions, please let me know.